let me just ask those of you who can still have your audio on and you can hear me, just to start reconvening, get yourself back to your table or chair. We'd like to do the report backs from the 5 different discussion groups, asking each reporter to take about 2 minutes or so to give us the highlights from the 2 questions that you had in your discussions. And Maria, my colleague at MIG, has been note-taking in the background from all the morning conversations, as well as these report backs. So, and as you know, these meetings are being recorded. So we feel like we're trying to document literally everything that this working group works on. And it'll be our job to sort through and feed back to the group in subsequent meetings, what we've heard to be the significant findings and suggestions, and give the group an opportunity to reflect and review those and have a process whereby we can indicate, each of us will have an opportunity to indicate our level of support for the ideas that are emerging. So I'll describe more about that process later, but that was just to get us back to our agenda where we are at this moment. We're asking each group to report back, and I think I'm going to work from the back front in terms of numbering. So if group 5 could be ready, and whoever was the recorder, be willing to share the screen to show the notes, just to support your reporter in remembering what those highlights were. Please don't feel it's necessary to read absolutely everything that you all came up with. If there's something that you feel was a significant finding or discussion point, please share those with us. Again, try to keep your report backs to a couple of minutes, and just trust that everything that is on those sheets will be shared with everybody. So your opportunity to give us a narrative on your breakout group. So group 5, who's our reporter? Okay, that's you, Helen. Okay, and your scribe was
Kim.
Kim, yeah. Let's go, Kim. If you don't mind sharing your screen and help Helen with the notes. I should say that I dropped in on most of the groups, and the note takers did a fantastic job. I hope you all agree and appreciate the staff for doing that. Okay, Helen, take it away.
Let me know if you can see the screen.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, the question was, what assumptions do you think are important for the district to consider in developing new trails? And the point was made that multiple viewpoints need to be considered. One viewpoint shouldn't dominate. And there should be since there will be competing interests and resources like time of day, trails. When that happens, the district needs to emphasize communication and planning to address limited resources. You can't design every trail for every use, was another assumption. It's important for people to spend time in these places and be educated. Lifetime learning experience, to be conscientious of everyone's experiences. Another assumption is there's going to be more people using the parks, and there will be a learning curve and a greater need for trail etiquette. This increased use means that the district will need additional funds for development, for an example being continuation of the parcel tax, for maintenance and repair, as well as acquisition. Another assumption should be to expect the unexpected. For example, the 2017 flooding, and another one would be the wildfires we had last summer and fall. And a final assumption is that we are maintaining the parks properly. For example, right now the Park District has their hands full with a tree die-off, which is going to need additional funding. And any management is going to be done with the best intent, with the best science background for the natural environment. The second question was, what ideas do you have for promoting conservation goals? And one thing we came up with there is that you need to start with looking at the land on a large map, and especially noting environmentally sensitive areas. The Park District could create a portfolio of trails that are multi-use, and others could be designated as single use. Depending on proximity, it could accommodate most users by things like time of day use. Education and communication are an important part of this in order to communicate the rules of the road. The Park District needs to do more enforcement, and this requires more investment of resources, but it is necessary. We could lean on technology to address cost effectiveness. For rogue trails that might have been created at night, how to deal with these from an enforcement question and perspective. And one person suggested a night vision camera to get evidence. Another idea is mountain biker patrols. I think I've gone over my 2 minutes. Should I just end it there? And
Yeah, I think that's fine. It's
Okay,
great. You
right.
guys had a lot of great ideas, and we will document those for sure. Thanks,
Okay,
Ellen.
great.
Thank you. Group 4. Who is our reporter from Group 4? Make yourself known.
Which one is group 4?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see.
I think Norman's the reporter for our group.
Okay. Norman, do you need the notes in front of you?
Yes, somebody
All
take
right.
notes.
Yes, Neoma was taking notes.
Okay.
Neoma, can you share your screen for Norm? And again, Norman, just the highlights, just a couple of minutes, please.
Right. Well, I think I'll just, while the notes are up, people can look at that. I think one of the things we talked about in terms of assumptions was that the parks and trails and the properties, the lands are a limited resource, and maybe there needs to be some way to deal with how to handle that in terms of a sort of a cap on users, maybe, or rotating the park openings and closings, particularly as we see the parks that are closer to the population areas reaching some kind of quote overcapacity in a sense. People also want to try to now to identify future trends and how to respond to those, in addition to of course protecting habitat values and wildlife habitat. There was an assumption that their connectivity of trails is important, but that needs to be put in the context of protecting wildlife habitat and values. Let's see, education and enforcement was talked about as an important component of this. When we came to future issues, protecting wildlife values is looking at potentially enforcement and education. There was a suggestion that Marin County has a way of working on creating new parks that may be a better approach, so to speak, or a different approach that may get us to more of a consensus building than otherwise. And what else? And that we need to look at the various impacts, and certainly all users have impacts, but we need to look at the impacts and in the context that we have a limited resource, and again, going back to the idea of stewardship, being able to identify what are the key areas that are important for wildlife and habitat. Maybe, I hope I got it. If I didn't, anybody in the group can certainly pipe up and say I missed something.
Right. Well, I think you did a great job, and right at 2 minutes, Norman. Thank you. And as I said, we definitely have a lot of great information in the details here that we'll keep going forward with. Okay, number 3. Let's see, group 3. That was Devin's
mine.
group? Sean's group, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe is it Kathy Roth will read for us. Let me get my screen shared.
So first we spoke about the assumptions, and I think we all did have shared assumptions that one main goal is to preserve the environment to minimize the impact of new trails, and that certain areas are more sensitive than others. But that also recreation is a very valid and important role of the parks and is important. Talked about in the new areas and the land banks having connections to the existing parks, and also about population growth and growth patterns in the future, looking towards the future in terms of where constructing trails. Then we spoke about ways to minimize the impacts of recreational use and other use. And one main thing was trail design, talking about how to minimize shortcuts and using trail design where there's certain areas that people are definitely wanting to go, that the trail will go there. And then if there's areas that they want to keep people away from, nesting areas and something like that, use trail design to make that less of an attractive nuisance to them. And also trail design in the sense of grading and sight lines. And how to minimize braiding or people creating trails that go off and come back again. And then we spoke about alternative days and whether that's practical or not. And Becky talked about the ranch roads are in many areas not desirable. They're too steep and cause erosion. So there are places where they would want to remove ranch roads, but then also, excuse me, ranch roads are important for emergency access. I would say in general, we were in general agreement. There was no one who disagreed with these basic goals, but as with everything, the devil is in the details.
Of course.
If there's anything I didn't say, feel free to type up.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Kathy, and group 3. And on to group 2. That looks like Devin, your group, and who's going to speak up for your?
Yeah, this was Mary. Mary,
Mary.
here. Thank you.
Hi, Mary. This is your speech.
Yes,
Okay.
here's my speech. So our group was Amelia Marshall, Pam Young, and me, and we were supervised by Devin, and then we were corrected by Brian. So we were very well, managed. We had the complete range of perspectives from it. So I'm just going to report what we all said and not who said it, because it's pretty broad. Human presence has an automatic impact that needs to be managed in the parks, and that we need studies funded to see what that is. And on the other hand, parks are for people as well as plants and wildlife. We need to look at the trails in a more granular fashion. We also said the devil is in the details, like other groups. And we need to find balance. We need to find the sweet spot, balancing all of the different needs in the parks. Then we got to who makes that call. And that's where Brian leapt in and said he shouldn't be saying anything, but the board makes the call. And we talked about that. And we questioned how closely trail planners work with stewardship. And we found out that they work very closely and it's not a competition. I personally was satisfied with that. In promoting conservation, we had the suggestion that we fund studies to do very thorough evaluation of new trails. And we need to know why trails are crowded and eroding, that too much of what we have is anecdotal. And we disagreed about whether more trails needed to be built. One member of the group said no, one said yes, and I think the third was in the middle. And came down to pilots. We have some new areas that are going to open up. Devin mentioned Thurgood Marshall, Rodney Ranch Golf Course, Clayton. Maybe we should build out a few new trails and study what impact that has and how they work, whether they lessen the crowding, etc. So that was our little group. We did really well. We bonded.
That's great. Great to hear. And I appreciate that you started with acknowledging the different perspectives and that you still managed to have a productive conversation, it seems like. And
I thought Amelia really just put her hand up. We may have a few seconds left.
Oh, I do see. Yeah. Amelia, go ahead real quickly. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Mary did a great job summarizing our discussion, which was pretty far-flung and abstract. One point I would like to make is that when planners consider an area like take for example, the Roddy Ranch Golf Course. I think there is a general tendency to silo the view of what goes on, limit the task to where the boundaries are, but you got to look at what else happens. Like, for example, Roddy Ranch Golf Course, it's a disturbed area. The environmentalists will probably have less concern with that, but if you connect a trail to Black Diamond Mines, that could have some huge impacts. And similarly, if you connect it to the future equestrian center for the children of Antioch and that part of East Contra Costa County, having bicycles and horses together would be a concern. So I think there needs to be more of a systemic overall view rather than a siloed view of planning.
Great. I appreciate that point. Thanks, Amelia. Last presentation from Suzanne's group. Suzanne, who's your reporter?
I think there was still some deciding happening when we left.
Who would like to volunteer?
Yes, I volunteered.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Are the notes going to be shared and then I can speak from the notes?
Yes.
Thank you. And we too had a spirited group with different viewpoints, so it was great to discuss them and just as far as learn a little bit more about each person's perspectives. All right. So as far as assumptions, some of the assumptions that we thought were important was as far as looking in the new parks, understanding the demand. And we thought that as far as if we were able to understand that, then we could identify different parks that would take, developing trails there would take pressure off of parks that were heavily impacted. We also really discussed the need for relief from overcrowding, and just as far as having trails just in other areas so people could spread out. And then looked at the whole kind of narrow trails kind of debate. So just as far as there was still a little bit more debate about that. And we looked at just as far as in the future when you are developing those new trails that there's just really that opportunity within new parks for looking at multi-use and designing good trails there. Also, just as far as in the planning part, making sure that environmentalists are included in the beginning to make sure impacts are minimal. And then one question that was, one assumption was looking at equity, and we discussed why it was important. So building new trails just as far as where there's not a lot of access to existing trails or recreational experiences. And then just as far as looking at what's available when there's new trails. So are there stables in nearby areas? And, you know, if there are stables in nearby area, kind of looking at should that particular park have more equestrian built trails, or so kind of looking at what are those different amenities in the area. And then also looking at demographics, because even though currently there's a set of demographics, but what is that growth demographics over time? And how are we considering that in the development of parks? And then also looking at access for youth who ride their bikes to parks, and then also individuals that don't have cars. So how are we building trails that are more inclusive of our less resource communities? And just one thing that was brought up too, as far as in the bike discussion, and narrow trails, is in new parklands. If new parklands are built and everything, and new trails in those parklands, should we consider closing bike trails in in parkland. So that was something that was brought up.
Great.
And then
Is that
do you want
everything?
us, yes, there were the other comments just as far as what we think the park could do differently. We just thought that maybe trail work could be a requirement to participate in trail events. So maybe this was a way to increase people's stewardship of trails. Then also permitting process. So maybe just as far as for certain type of events requiring volunteer work rather than paying a permit fee. And then there was also the idea of like the district creating Adopt the Trails program where people can have ownership and trail users could be called if there's an issue or a problem, then that group that adopted the trail could either come and help with the trail work or education process. So those were the comments from our group.
Very good. Thank you, Luana, very much. Joseph, I see your hand. I'm going to ask if it can be a quick comment here. Don't want to open up a big discussion time. We're right at noon, so go ahead. We can't hear you. Can you try? There you go.
I apologize. I hope this is better.
Okay, we can hear you.
What I wanted to say in our session, we talked about Sean, who's been a park ranger for over 10 years, was recommending that America institute a draft for every citizen in America to be a park ranger for a little bit. And in light of not being able to do that, we kind of settled on maybe we could have a YouTube channel where park rangers tell stories about what it's like to be a park ranger. That would also excite people about parks, maybe inform people about what it's like to be a park ranger, and maybe work as a recruiting and retention device for existing park rangers. So we talked about doing that as a way to get the stories out of what is it like to manage parks from a park ranger's point of view.
Right. Thanks, Joseph. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We are right at 12 o'clock, a little bit beyond, and I appreciate everybody's commitment to this process. So I'm going to turn it back to Devin. We have just one more agenda item, and for those of you who can stay, great. And I'll just turn it back over to Devin for our schedule.
Okay, thank you, Lou. And thank you all today. Really important meeting. So many different perspectives. I know people are having to sign off. I'll just let everybody know about the next meetings. So July 15th will be our next meeting, followed by August 5th, and our final meeting, September 16th. Now, September 16th is the Yom Kippur holiday. So if anyone celebrates that holiday and would like us to reschedule the meeting, we can certainly do that. So send me a private message and we will look into rescheduling September 16th. One last note, I've added all of you to our mailing list for Roddy Ranch planning efforts. There is a July meeting coming up, July 1st public meeting. So if you've got an email about that, that's where that came from. That was me inviting you all. And with that, is there any last announcements from any of the groups or individuals before we sign off? Any big fundraising events happening or group hikes, or? Because I know people are getting back into the parks. Okay, well, if not, thank you all. Really important meeting again, as I said. And thanks to Amanda as our backstage manager, and to Naoma,
Thank you.
John, Suzanne, Kim for helping us facilitate. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.